In the last of our videos on observational research, we're going to look at the method of administration. Are we having humans observe other humans or humans observe phenomenon, or are we having machines observe humans or machines observe phenomenon? So this is the last of the considerations as you're designing an observational research project. The first is the degree of structure. Is it structured so you know enough about the behavior? You can create a checklist where you track what do people do? Do they do this? Yes, no. How much time do they spend doing this activity? Or is it unstructured, where you're simply capturing and writing down everything that you observe people or what happens at the event? Unstructured is used for exploratory research. Structured is used for more descriptive analysis or for causal research. So if we're doing experiments or test markets. The degree of disguise, is it open? Do people know they're being watched? Or is it disguised? They don't know they're being observed. And we talked about the ethical considerations as part of that. And then we talked about setting. Is it naturally occurring? So we're observing people where they do that particular behavior. Or is it contrived? Have we created a virtual reality or a mock-up, a simulation where we try to get them to replicate their normal behavior? And then we looked at time of behavior. Are we observing the behavior as it occurs, or are we looking for evidence of previous behavior, either through sifting through garbage or going through receipts or documentation to observe that events have happened? So that brings us to the last component here, which is human or machine, which one is doing the observation. And so we want to conclude our discussion by talking about the different machines that can be used, the different electronic or mechanical devices that will aid in the observation. So instead of having a human complete a checklist or write up what they observe, we are using machines and tools to help detect what is happening. So let's go through some different examples. We're going to talk about a traffic counter, people meter, facial action coding, voice pitch analysis, functional magnetic resonance imaging, so MRIs, electroencephalographs, galvanic skin responses, pupillometers, and then other more proprietary technology like home scan, market track, and clickstream. So let's take a look at some of these. So let's start by defining, as soon as I figure out where I put my pencil, a traffic counter. So a traffic counter is going to measure, we are going to measure the flow of vehicles. Okay. And when we look at a traffic counter, the old school methods for traffic counters, if I just scroll through here, would be like what you see here. So perhaps you have seen where there's this black strip on the ground that you drive over. And when people drive over it, it counts. One more car, next car. And so this was the old school method for determining how much traffic there was, and we try to decide whether or not we should put in a stop sign or a light. Now, you might not see those anymore, and instead what you see looks more like a camera that is mounted on a post, and what that camera is doing is it is taking an image of the intersection. So here we have a machine and a phenomenon, which is movement through the intersection rather than tracking individuals and their individual behavior. And in this case, we can use AI, machine learning, and it's identifying not only when a vehicle comes through the intersection, but it's also identifying whether it is a truck, whether it's a car, whether it's a bus, whether it's a motorcycle, and we get a lot more information because now not only are we able to count the number of vehicles, but in this case, we can count exactly what kind of vehicle. And in this particular example that you see here, it also counts when there's pedestrians. So you know the need for a crosswalk or the length of the light in order to allow for other flows from other directions or other types of individuals or vehicles coming from other ways. So here we are counting traffic. So we have machines observing a phenomenon. All right, I'll turn that off and we'll go back to our list here. All right, so the next one that we are going to talk about is a people meter. So people meter measures, so here we go. We measure the TV programming that participants are exposed to. So old school, what would happen is, so I think I told you in a different video that growing up, we were kind of an AC Nielsen family, which is we used to get things in the mail to be involved in marketing research. And one of the things we would get in the mail was a little booklet. And that booklet would be for us to write down what TV shows we watched and when. And so AC Nielsen is using this to determine how many people were watching TV way back before streaming and back before PVRs and DVRs, so go back a long ways. And we would write down what we watched and when. And the idea was they were collecting how many people and what age group were watching different shows at different times. This would then inform, when they went to put an ad in a TV show, how many eyes would have been on that commercial. And what age range would the people be in that who are watching that commercial? So you know who your target market is, and so you could set prices for the advertisements in TV. All right, well, they stopped doing the pencil and paper because, of course, there's issues with accuracy when we're having to self-record and report. And remember, the challenge with observational research is faulty recall, right? I can't remember what I watched when. So instead of having people report what they do, we can monitor what they do with technology. And so when we started to get DVRs and PVRs, the way that it worked is that if you were... So you had a TiVo way back when, and that would then track what you watched. And so Nielsen and other companies could actually determine how many people were watching a show at any particular time. So again, equipment here, a people meter, is measuring the TV programming that the household is exposed to determine what the ads they are exposed to. Today, well, many people watch their shows on streaming devices, right? You're watching your Netflix, your Amazon Prime, your Disney Plus. Well, in those cases, that information is being collected by Netflix about people watching their Netflix shows. And so that used to be kind of hidden information that the companies kept for themselves because they were simply providing, you pay your $15 for your streaming service and there wasn't ads. And so they didn't have to disclose how many people were watching different shows. It was simply kept for internal purposes, but it was definitely being tracked. And so being used to inform which shows got renewed, which shows should be released at certain times of the year, and those internal operations decisions. Well, now as streaming services are starting to have an ad version, we're seeing more disclosure of how many people are watching different shows. And so at the time we're filming this video, this is the report from Netflix of the most watched shows of all times on Netflix. And so we can see in terms of what has had the most viewership at any particular moment in time was Wednesday season 1, followed by Stranger Things season 4. And we see many seasons of Bridgerton are also getting a high number of views. So lots of eyeballs watching those particular shows. And so if Netflix is creating a version of their streaming service that have ads in them, then they would be charging more for the ads in those particular shows. If you want to be an ad that's featured in the Wednesday show, the Stranger Things, the Bridgerton, it'll cost you more money. Now, historically, when it comes to advertising, it hasn't always been just the number of viewers. So if we think about the shows on like regular TV, not streaming on Netflix, but on just regular cable, which ones have the most expensive commercials? Well, historically, football, it has a larger number of viewers, so it does have much more expensive commercials, right? Think about Super Bowl commercials. Millions of people watch it. Those are the most expensive commercials at all. But it's not all viewers that matter equally. In fact, the viewers that matter are the 18 to 49-year-old range, because those individuals are more likely to go out and do things, right? So older individuals more likely to stay at home. Children don't have any purchasing power. So that middle age range are the ones that are more likely to go out and go events, go to restaurants. They're also more likely to go out and make purchases the next day. So they're the ones that the companies care the most about, because they're the ones that are more likely to actually act on the advertisements that are shown. All right, let's go back to our list. All right, that was people meters. So we're measuring here the number of people that are exposed to something, in this case, a TV show. So we're measuring TV programming that participants are exposed to. And then we want to compare that to people readers. People readers is a machine that records the respondents' reading material and eye reactions. So in this case, what we would do is, if we're looking at creating some promotional materials, we would actually have, it's kind of a little set of glasses or a camera that is going to look at where is the eye focused on that particular advertisement. So we have the picture, an image being taken of the material that's being looked at, and then where is their eye looking at on that particular material. So what is it people immediately focus on when we have an ad, a billboard, we put up a sign? That's what people readers tell us. Where do people's eyes focus when they're put in front of some kind of reading material? Okay. The next one we have here is facial action coding. And this is where we use computers to identify emotions based on facial expressions. So with AI, machine learning, we're getting better at this in terms of we can use video, or we can have photos that then take an image and start to analyze, okay, is that person smiling? Is that person happy? Is that person sad? And so it's computer programming to help us identify the facial expressions being conveyed. Is that more positive? Is that more negative? Are they angry? From a marketing and research perspective, we can show you a TV show, we can show you an ad and see the emotional responses in your face. I use that AI to try to detect it. So are people responding positively to the ad campaign? So if maybe we have a commercial like the one we looked at in one of our earlier videos, we showed you some McDonald's commercials where they're trying to tug at your heartstrings and get you to feel an emotional connection to McDonald's. So we would show you the ad, and then we would see, based on a machine monitoring your facial expressions, did it look like that you had that emotional response to that commercial? And is it the emotional response we want? Do you look angry? Because that's not what we want you to get out of this commercial. We want you to be happy, smile. And so we're looking at measuring that reaction to some kind of stimulus, whether that is a video or whether that's some kind of story, something that you're being told. Okay. The next one here is an fMRI, so functional magnetic resonance imaging. So this here, we're going to use neuroimaging. To measure brain activity. So the idea here with the fMRI, and we'll show you an image of, do I have a picture of that? Maybe I don't. Oh yeah, here I do. Okay. All right, so here's an fMRI, and different parts of the brain are highlighted depending on the type of emotions or the type of information that's being recalled. if it is more of an automatic response versus thinking back in terms of historical knowledge, your memories. So different parts of the brain are activated depending on the certain things that you might think about or the certain type of emotional reaction you have. And so we can use fMRI, put you under an MRI, take an image of your brain when you are told different things, shown pictures of things, to see what kind of response that triggers in people. There is what is called an electroencephalograph. Electroencephalograph measures the electrical pulses on the scalp. And generate a record of brain activity. Okay. And so you can see here, right here you can see that's this cap that you put on. It's a bunch of electrodes that then will measure that electricity that's generated by you as you think about certain things. And so different waves indicate different types of emotions here. So you can see the information being collected shows the difference that appears in terms of if you're excited or relaxed, if you're asleep. So we can measure your response to some kind of stimuli. So we can use this for experiments. If we are looking at treatments, maybe we're looking at cognitive behavior or mental health treatments. And is that changing the way that you are thinking and feeling? We can use it to see if you are excited by something. And so if we're looking at marketing research and we're testing out, products, does this make you happy, sad, excited, bored? So we can use it in a range of different areas of disciplines in terms of research. Often in terms of experimentation, in terms of if this happens, then what happens, right? We are observing your response. What else we got? Voice pitch analysis. So this is studying the change in vibrations, in the relative vibrations or frequencies of the human voice. It's what it sounds like. Does the pitch of your voice change? So do you get higher pitch, lower pitch? As you are talking, is there a change in your voice at all? The idea here is that if there is a relative change in your voice, then that means that there is an emotional response. And so different types of vibrations, whether your voice goes higher or lower, indicate different emotional responses. All right, what else is here? Galvanic skin response. I used to have one. I don't teach marketing research anymore. My plate was too busy with a bunch of other courses, so I gave my galvanic skin response to my colleague. But essentially, you put a little sensor on your finger, and we measure electrical pulses. Sorry, I got that wrong. Hang on. Wrong definition. Pulled the wrong one. Let's try that again. We're really measuring electrical resistance. There we go. So measure electric resistance of the skin. Of the skin. And this here, it is an associated with an actuation response. In other words, we're looking at when your palms get sweaty. So we're looking at your perspiration. Actuation response. So you can see here somewhere, here we go. What we look at here is there a change in kind of in that temperature? Do you sweat? And so that's going to indicate a change in emotion. And I had one because with our face-to-face marketing research class, we would actually play with putting it on and looking at the results of it. And so you can see here an example of the readout that you get. And so it's going to change in terms of the amount of perspiration, the temperature of your skin, whether it's more hot or cold, is all part of that. So electric resistance of the skin associated with an actuation response or perspiration. All right, then we have a pupillometer. This measures pupil dilation. And so we can see an example of that here. Put it on, show something to the participant, and it will track the size of your pupils. Do they dilate? And so that again shows a response. And typically what we're doing here is we are trying to bridge the gap between kind of surveys and interviews where we can ask people about their emotions and how they feel, and observational research where we are tracking behavior. The thing with observational research is that when it's something that's hard to recall, when people don't know they do it, it's kind of automatic. That's where the observation works. The surveys work and the interviews work when people can actually explain how they feel. This bridges the gap here with this technology. You'll notice a lot of these are trying to measure emotion. And that's because what if we want to measure how people are feeling and their emotional response, but it's not such a big emotional response that we couldn't ask them about it because it doesn't register as being hugely emotional. It's more subtle, it's smaller. And it might be for triggers that aren't as memorable, right? So if it's just simply looking at an image and how that makes you feel, that's very small. And so we want to measure that in terms of observe it, but it's not to the point where people will be able to actually formally explain it. So we're trying to bridge the gap between with using our machines to observe phenomenon and to observe people, to kind of give us the best of both worlds, the observation as well as the understanding of the emotions when people won't necessarily be able to recall or explain it on their own. So we've gone through a number of different types of observational research, from measuring the flow of vehicles to measuring the TV programming that people are exposed to recording what respondents are reading and their eye reactions, to the emotions based on facial expressions, to measuring emotions based on brain activity and images of the brain, to measuring those emotions based on electrical pulses on the scalp, to measuring emotions based on changes in terms of voice pitch, the amount of perspiration, and the dilation of pupils. So why do we want observational research? It gives us firsthand information. It avoids issues where respondents are not willing to answer or unable to answer, where it's things that they can't recall. It's things that are so routine that they really don't think about, they just do automatically. It'll give us information on what people truly do. So on what people buy, where they focus their time and their effort. And it's more quick to obtain that information about behavior than it is to ask people to recall their behavior. So it's increased accuracy and information quicker by just observing them doing it rather than asking them to remember doing it. The disadvantage, the downside to observational research is that it's only behavior that is done in public, right? So it has to be observable. And it has to be something you can actually see, right? So only behavior and physical characteristics are we really going to be observed. We don't get why people are doing things. We don't get what they're thinking about. That we have to get out of alternative methods like interviews. So it doesn't tell you why people are doing things. We're simply observing what they're doing. And the challenge, of course, is projecting their behavior into the future. It is going to be very specific to the context. So given this point in time, given the other options, given the entire environment that they're in, that will determine their behavior. But if any of that changes, then the behavior will change, right? So it is very difficult to kind of project this forward in time. It can be time consuming to collect this, especially if we're having to observe a human observing an event. We have to wait for the event to occur. And so we sit around and wait until one person comes down the grocery store aisle to look at the cans of soup, right? With machines, we can automate that to help it make that a bit more quick, as long as it's something that many people do. Like if we're watching traffic go through the intersection, then we can count the many people who go through. If the behavior is not frequent, it's very time consuming and costly. The location of observation, right? We talked about whether it is going to be natural or contrived. The challenge with the contrived, with creating the simulation, is that it can bias the results. The problem with open observation is it can bias the results. And so the big key here with observational research is being able to recognize and minimize the impact that the researcher and the research design is impacting the results, is pushing it one way or the other, and not reflecting how people truly behave. So we use observational research for behaviors that are common, that are public, where we want to see what people do, or see how often events occur, or see what happens when events occur. So it's got to be something that we can observe and see, either ourselves through humans observing, or we can detect it, monitor it, track it with machines.